I see on Facebook Live there's a night countdown. Ooh,
Yeah, there's always a slight delay there.
right on.
And so let's get a sound check. Sound check.
Talking, talking, talking.
We usually got a couple early birds come on and help us make sure the sound is okay. All right, Sean Stryker, sound is good. All right, welcome everybody to Canhammer TV. This is May the 5th and just one day after May the 4th. So May the 4th be with everybody. And
I believe today is the Revenge of the Fifth.
Oh, I have not heard that one. That is really good, actually.
I wish I could take credit.
Revenge of the Fifth. Okay, so tonight is a special episode of Custodes Tactica. This is episode 56. Yes, we have made 56 episodes talking about Custodes. And this episode is an episode on soup. So with me tonight, we have none other than the legendary John Lennon, all the way from, well, it looks like he's with the Emperor right now. But from Art of War, John Lennon, who is joining us to tell us all about soup. And so welcome, John. Thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be on here.
Yeah, it's good to see you again. I haven't seen you since Charity Hammer last year, which now seems like a very long time ago.
Yeah. Well, you saw me in February. The
That's
Hammer
right.
team tournament was just a little bit after, but
That's right.
still 15 months, give or take. And
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to when we all get to see each other in person again.
Yeah, man. Hopefully Charity Hammer this summer. But
Hopefully.
Canada's screwing the pooch a little bit on our vaccinations, so.
Well, hopefully they get it together in time for us to join you there.
Yeah. So tonight we'll be talking about soup, and as people know, if they followed the channel for long enough, the whole purpose of the channel is to promote and educate about playing Custodes as a pure faction. It's always been like that from the beginning, and but I've bowed to the pressure to talk soup, mostly because John has been doing so well on Art of War with soup Custodes. There's been quite a lot of soup floating around as we try and figure out ways to navigate this new deadlier and deadlier meta. And so I thought it was a good topic to talk about. So people might remember we used to play Loyal 32 and Rusty 17. I think I took Rusty 17 to Adepticon a couple of years ago. So that was a thing. And then it kind of fell away out of fashion for a bit, but now it seems like it's pretty popular again. Maybe it's because we only people have 3-up invulns anymore. I don't know.
It's true. Suddenly everyone wants the Custodes.
So before we start, John, why don't you tell people about Art of War? I'm a patron of Art of War. I've been a big supporter of everything that Nick's been doing since he started Brown Magic, and so just slid right into Art of War. And so tell people a bit about Art of War and what they can find there.
Absolutely. Well, we appreciate you. So here at the Art of War, we have coaching. We have streams on YouTube that are free. Basically, you can check us out on our website, theartofwar40k.com. And we have a really, wide combination of both, paywall and free content. Basically, we do free live streams 4 days a week at 1 p.m. That's Monday through Thursday. We do 2 paint streams and 2 games. And, we've always been working up our quality. We always put out surveys to get good feedback. We've built a really wonderful community, and it's fantastic. And we appreciate all the support that we've gotten. But if you haven't seen us, check us out. We strive to put, the best, highest quality competitive content on the internet that we can. We strive to make all of our games both entertaining and, again, showing off real competitive, lists and concepts, having high-level players play against each other. We're trying to, play at the highest level of the game and show it off to everyone. And we also have a lot of stuff in the Art of War War Room, where we have coaching clinics with, a wide array of great coaches, such as myself, Richard Siegler, Nick Nanavati, Mark Perry, Ridvan, Scary, Martinez, Brad Chester, a whole host of great players. You can check us out on our website, theartofwar40k.com, or our YouTube channel. And we have not 1 or 2, but we have 3 podcasts now.
Yeah.
We have both the Art of War 40k and Art of War Down Under. And we're actually in the process of recording the first couple of episodes for a new podcast, Art of War Unbroken.
Ooh.
So make sure you check that out. Art of War Unbroken is going to be focusing on players that are trying to get to the top level but fall just a little bit short, and working on improving their game rather than just taking the players that have won. We want to focus on kind of both sides of what it takes to get to the top.
Okay. All right. That's an interesting concept. It's kind of like following on from Adam Abramovitz's concept with Best General and kind of, how to get to the top. All right.
Absolutely. Well, there's always inspiration to follow with Adam.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Okay. So the first question for you, John, then is why soup at all? Or why not soup? If people are on the fence, why would you soup?
So I think that the biggest reason to soup is going to be the price tag associated with Custodes. Even though it got a little bit better when Sisters of Silence became de facto Custodes with the Talons of the Emperor updates, the biggest thing is that as good as Custodes are, sometimes you don't want to spend points on what they do. Custodes bring a lot of good things to the field. There's everyone already knows this if you're listening to this. You know that Custodes have a lot of strengths, but their weaknesses are that they have a relatively low wound count for an army, which means that they're not great at taking a bunch of smites. They have very expensive units. I mean, the cheapest thing that a pure Custodes army could leave back on an objective is still about a 100-point character, which doesn't feel good leaving alone. And like a squad is going to be close to 150 if you leave it back there. When you bring in allies from all the different Imperium factions, you get access to a much wider array of data sheets. Custodes have a couple of great units, but between both their Codex and the Forge World supplement, they only have so many unit choices, and they just don't have a unit for every role. Space Marines have, it feels like they have 100 data sheets. You can find something for the job you want.
I think they actually do have 100 data sheets.
They do have 100. You know what? I figured if I went high, I wasn't going to be that far off. But Custodes they have a limited number of data sheets. If you want to fill a very specific role and you don't happen to have a data sheet that's well accustomed for it, then you're kind of shoehorning something else in. And with Custodes, if you're going to spend the points on one of their units, you want to get full effect out of it because you're just not getting anything cheap.
Yeah.
If I lose a random, a guardsman squad and it's not, being fully optimal at what it's doing, it's no big deal. It's a 50-point unit. It gets 55 now. But Custodes, when you start putting things out of position, you're spending 150 points and often very much more to do a job that something cheaper could accomplish. So for me, I like adding allies because it gives me more tools. It gives me access to more relics, more warlord traits, more stratagems, just more ways to play the game where Custodes have some really nice pieces, but they have so few of them that I've always wanted to have a couple of allies in with my Custodians.
Yeah. And I think there's a big flip side to that, at least right now, before we get a new book. The ninth edition seems to disincentivize souping, and I don't presume that's going to be any different when we get our new book or when Guard get their new book. And so you soup while you can because it may no longer be the best thing to do later.
Yeah, it definitely, 9th edition has disincentivized it a little bit, and there are some downsides. The biggest would be that if you're getting multiple detachments, you're spending command points on one of them. Custodes have so many great stratagems. I don't think that they need, to start with 12 CP, but also there is an opportunity cost. If you throw in a guard battalion, that's one less turn that you slap the -1 strength and no reroll combo on Telemon, or whatever, pieces you put in your list. I like Telemons, but certainly not every list has them. So there's a direct opportunity cost there. As well, if you add something, you start using their strats too. If you take a guard detachment and then you start spending command points on, Vengeance for Cadia or combined squads or whatever guard stratagems you're using, again, that's strats that your CP that you're not spending on the Custodian strats. And Custodians have better than average stratagems. They have quite a few that are really, really good, and that can be game changing when you use them at the right time. So you do lose some stuff. And also, point for point, it's hard to get allies that are as durable as Custodes.
Yeah.
If you take 30 infantry instead of 3 shield guard, 30 infantry is sometimes more durable than shield guard. If you're playing against smite spam, I'd rather have the guardsmen. But sometimes you play against bolt guns and they will die, in the effort it would take to kill one Custodes model, and that does make a big difference.
Yeah, for sure. So if we're talking about, filling weaknesses, and you mentioned, low model count is obviously, we're one of the most elite armies in the game. Are there any other specific weaknesses that you look to fill when you're thinking about adding in your soup detachments?
Yeah, a couple that I think of are model count, obviously, unit count, having cheap garbage units to screen. Sometimes my opponent has a unit that's going to ride from reserve and kick my butt, and I don't want to be so tough that I survive it because that's a very daunting task. I would rather be so dispensable that I don't care if they do. As awesome and amazing as Custodes are, it nothing in that army wants to get hit by like 10 plasmid scepters. I'm sorry, not 10, like 6 plasmid scepters with weapons from the Dark Age.
Yeah.
No one wants that. Not a single Unidar army actively wants that. You know, some units can try to survive it. Some can hope, you know, shut off rerolls, hope they overcharge. But, you know, 10 guardsmen, I don't care.
Yeah.
Like, I don't need to spend resources now. So, you know, the screens is a big thing. Also, just the different types of firepower. Custodes have a couple very efficient shooting platforms, but when you only have 2 or 3 different efficient shooting units, if you don't have a unit for the job you need, well, you don't have another unit to turn to.
Yeah.
And that's always something that I'm afraid of. So I was like allying in a little bit of different kinds of firepower just to have diversity in my shot count.
Yeah. Yeah, our firepower definitely, as you say, maybe a couple units. Venatari come to mind probably, you know, as one of the more good shooting units, but we don't have a lot of actually really good shooting, especially long-range shooting.
Yep.
That's always been a weakness of ours. Like, Forge World plugged it for a little bit until it got nerfed, and then
Yes.
so, you know, that's always something that some people are looking to fill with their allies. Let's talk a little bit about kind of allies, but not really, and why you would or wouldn't consider taking these. So a lot of questions come up about Inquisitors, and mostly people are thinking running them for psychic protection, although how much psychic protection they actually give you is debatable. But do you consider Inquisitors at all? What do you think they might bring?
Yeah, absolutely. I like Inquisitors. They've got a bunch of different tools. The first and most obvious is that since they can go into detachment without taking up a slot and without breaking its purity, it's a very easy thing to add to a pure Custodes list. And as a matter of fact, adding an Inquisitor can actually be cheaper than having than just adding in like a squad to hold an objective. The Inquisitor is actually the cheapest thing to leave behind.
Yeah.
But it gives you psychic options in both ways. One, it's a deny that you don't have to spend command points on, always useful. 2, it lets you cast powers, which, you know, Custodes as a faction do not have many avenues to deal mortal wounds to the enemy. So sometimes having a free smite to throw out is nice. It also unlocks psychic secondaries in general, where Custodes usually have a couple of very good secondaries, but sometimes struggle to pick that third one, I found.
Yeah.
That's been a problem with me when I've played a pure Custodes. That's another reason I like adding allies. An Inquisitor gives psychic options, and then you kind of fall into all the different options you can have with the named character Inquisitors. Most notably, I think of Draxus giving a fight last.
Yeah.
Whatever his name is, Codia's giving a soft equivalent to Vect. Those are the 2 most notable named Inquisitors. Hector Rex is a tough one, but honestly, when you're Custodes, you probably don't need to add a tough character. You can kind of already find one if you need it. What I've really liked having is having access to the fight last. And Codia's and some of the Malleus stuff, it's okay, but some of the buffs don't really matter for Custodes. Like auto passing morale is usually not a Custodes problem.
Yeah.
And then giving a 5-up invuln is absolutely not a Custodes problem.
Yeah.
That's a guard problem.
Yeah.
But Custodes don't need that. So an Inquisitor is nice. I think you would either add it for the CP regen of the Xenos Inquisitor, if you just took a really cheap one and then it's just a cheap unit you can leave on an objective. Because if your opponent doesn't have indirect, an Inquisitor behind a wall is good enough, you know?
Yeah.
If your opponent doesn't have indirect fire, you can either leave a full Custodes squad behind a wall on an objective, or you can leave an Inquisitor there. I'd rather just leave the Inquisitor.
Yeah.
And you get a free, get a nice deny, maybe an occasional smite, or an ignore Overwatch. Just adding a psychic tree does give you something that Custodes don't traditionally have access to.
Yeah, they do have a couple of nifty powers. So, I used to play Hector Rex, but his shield got worse, and he's still 100 points, and he's not really actually that tough because he's T3, and so I don't think he's worth 100 points anymore.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah. Speaking of 100 points, how about Assassins?
Ooh, Assassins, I think also actually fit a little more naturally into Custodes. That's actually one of the places I like them, because Inquisitors are great because of the buffs they give to Imperium armies, but I think that Custodes benefit from them a little less than your average Imperium army. And Assassins are just doing their own thing, and that works well, with the legions of single warriors here.
Yeah.
I think that honestly the Calexis is the perfect fit here, just because one of the classic bad matchups for Custodes, and there are always ways to mitigate it. One of the classic bad matchups is Psyker heavy armies, where someone's going to smite, and you have one good Deny the Witch with Custodes, and the next 6 smites don't count.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel good. And if you have to spend a command point just to try and roll off to stop a spell, does not feel great. So having a Colexis, literally put it in front of your army, and you will not be getting hit by smite. As long as that Colexis is visible, you're good. And a -2 to cast, means that your Deny the Witch strat becomes a lot more valuable, because even if your opponent, one, they may fail a spell, and then easy as that, you don't need to deny. 2, if they pass it, they're going to be 2 less, and that means that you just have a better chance to deny it. So I think adding a Colexis to Custodes has made a lot of sense at different points in the past. If I was going pure Custodes, I actually probably would try to finagle an Assassin in. I personally prefer to fill that role with an actual ally detachment, but that's because I like souping up a little bit. If I was going to stick pure, I think I would put a Colexis in. Also, again, a Colexis is a very good unit to leave in a spot as a screen on an objective. Because it's only hit on 6s, It doesn't need the character protection as much as other things. If I leave a random Inquisitor by itself and she gets shot by 20 bolt guns, she's probably dead.
Yeah.
But a Colexis by itself, your opponent still has to dedicate specific firepower, because, a random melt gun is probably not going to hit. A Colexis is only hit on 6s. So, they need a +1 to hit. They need auto hit weapons.
Yeah.
And then this is actual real resources that could have gone into Custodes, at which point I don't mind as much if they get allocated to a Colexis.
Yeah.
And it's just a useful screening tie-up unit to have.
Yeah. I know people have been running him as the backfield drop-in, secondary guy, because he's kind of a pain to take care of because he's hitting on 6s, and nobody really wants to hit on 6s anymore.
Exactly. If he's just getting an engage and off front point, is your opponent going to go out of their way to kill him? Maybe, but it's hard to commit to killing a Colexis because you never know what's going to be the thing that sticks.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can shoot 10 shots at it and get 0 hits or 5 hits. Hitting on 6s, you don't plan on that. You just pull the slot machine and see what happens.
And people have kind of forgotten what that's like because nobody overwatches anymore. So it's really shitty. It's really crappy hitting on 6s, and you can't stack -1s anymore. So we've forgotten.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that covers our 2 kind of not quite allies, but kind of allies. So now let's get into specific factions. So obviously we can only ally in Imperial factions, so we won't be talking about any other factions. Not like the old
Drukhari here, don't worry.
not the old days of take my Riptide Wing with my Custodes army. We're talking Sisters, Guards, Scions, Admech. Those are probably the most common. Somebody's asking in the chat about Knights. I've not seen that recently. But what do you want to talk? Should we talk about Guard first, because that's your pièce de résistance?
Let's start with Guard. I think Guard are the absolute classic ally of the Imperium. This is it's always friendly to the fluff to have some Guard tagging along with anyone, because there's Guard in every war zone. And it's also a relatively inexpensive army to acquire. You can find a used Guard army literally at any local gaming store in the United States, or probably Canada as well, I assume. You can find Guard everywhere.
Yeah.
So the real benefits of Guard are that they have a lot less expensive points per wound units than Custodes do. I mean, for the cost of 1 Custodes Guard, you can get 10 Guardsmen. And against mortal wound spam, that's literally triple the wounds that they have to chew through. And it's still OBSEC. They're good screens because you have access to move as soon as you take an HQ choice, which just means that your OBSEC screens are moving a minimum of 14 inches a turn if they're not shooting, if you're just advancing them, moving them. So they can go contest objectives a lot faster than Custodes can. They can get into the midfield a lot faster than Custodes can. They can go set up screens turn 1. Like if you go second, you have exactly 1 turn to set up screens against deep striking. Custodes, if you don't take their fast units, because they don't have many, suddenly you just don't screen, and that kind of sucks. And Guardsman is just 1 turn, go set up the screen, done.
Yeah.
As well, they bring very efficient, both by both heavy and light shooting platforms. My favorite, absolutely hands down, is the full payload Manticore. Yeah. I love it so much. It's an indirect platform that's strength 10 AP2 and flat 3 damage. I know Custodes players feel the pain of not having access to flat 3 damage sometimes when you start rolling D3 damage in close combat. The Manticore is consistent. It's only a ballistic skill 4, so you're not expecting miracles out of it. But because it's in direct fire, again, something Custodes strictly don't have access to, it does provide a very important role where a low model count Custodes list, often if you go first, you don't fire your guns on turn 1. because you only have a few drops, so your opponent probably is putting down their important stuff after they've seen where you go. You have limited access to redeploy, so it's not always easy to get an angle. You don't have a ton of long range way to fire. If you get some shots off, it may not be many. You may have to expose yourself a lot to do it because a lot of Custodes weapons are short ranged, especially the infantry-based ones and the biker-based ones, I suppose. But the manticore just shoots turn 1, and it stops shooting when it runs out of ammo or when it dies. That's it.
Yeah.
And it's just very useful because one of my big things with Custodes is that I found that I've played pure Custodes quite a bit, actually, and I sometimes find that I go first, my opponent's behind a wall, out of range, whatever, I do literally nothing. My opponent's like, wow, you did nothing, I'm just going to do that again. And then I do nothing again. And they come out on their turn, too. They've still got, plenty of time to play the game, but I only have 3 turns left. And I haven't killed a single model or inflicted a single wound. And I find that because a lot of Custodes units end up being a little bit slow, you can build speed in, but again, limited data sheets here. During the times where the Custodes bike is not efficient, it's actually pretty decent right now, but there have been times where it's just not efficient. During those times, Custodes don't have anything fast. You can take Clades grav tanks, but they don't want to go straight up field. You can take an Ares, but that's a very specific list archetype now. Yeah. You can just move, 5 to 8 inches up field with your Terminators and Dreadnoughts, or 6 to 8 inches, because Dreadnoughts are faster. But you're not doing anything. Yeah. And your opponent can be very comfortable behind a wall, waiting to pounce on you when the time is right. They're going to hit you at the exact same time that their reserves arrive. So they've planned it out perfectly. They don't have to take you on with half their army. They can be faster than you and go hit a specific spot. And because Custodes are a very durable, methodical army, I find that I can't wait for my opponent to come out. I have to start moving towards objectives, especially if I have like Dreadnoughts and Foot Guard, which is the part of Custodes that I like the most. Like Foot Guard, if I sit behind a wall for 2 turns and then I come out, I'm not making it to my opponent's objectives by the end of turn 5. Or if I do, I'm making their on turn 5 when that's not really useful anymore. I need to come out turn 1. I can't afford for my opponent to be comfortable hiding from me. And that's where the Manticores come in. I don't expect Manticores to like kill a Rhino every time they shoot or nuke Mortarion, but I expect them to make my opponent uncomfortable because no one wants to sit there while I just pull the lever and see what a Manticore does. Yeah. It hits on 4s, it has limited access to rerolls, but it's high strength, decent AP, decent damage, pretty reliable number of shots with custom regiments. I can rely on it to do something more often than not, and my opponent can't count it out ever. Because it's the right stats that it could hurt anything. So my opponent's never just going to sit there and tank it and see, like, yeah, this will be fine. Sometimes a Manticore does nothing, sometimes it does 15 damage. Like, my opponent isn't going to sit there and wait to find out.
Yeah, yeah. It's like that little niggling feeling in the back of your head that this thing can hit you no matter where you are, no matter what's happening. So I'm like, do I really want to stand here? And
oh yeah, Custodes are such a great anvil of an army. They're bad at provoking the opponent to pressure. Like they're bad at like putting pressure on the opponent if the mission's already favoring them. And I can't rely on the mission favoring me every time, so I need to put a little bit of pressure on the list. Some kind of a timer for my opponent, like, hey, you got to do something here.
Yeah. So the list that you were running in that recent RTT you guys had, like your in-house RTT, basically had your battalion of guardsmen and then 2 manticores. Is that kind of like what you're thinking to take out of the guard codex, basically?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I found was by far the most effective, because I tried a couple variants before I settled on that. For anyone curious, to give a quick summary, it's a Custodes spearhead of Trajan Valoris. It's a Vanguard. Trajan Valoris, 3 Contemptor Galidus Dreadnoughts, 2 Telemons with 1 Arachnus cannon and 1 Telemon Stasis. And then it's a guard battalion of 2 company commanders, 2 infantry squads, 1 Scion squad, 1 platoon commander, 3 command squads with plasma guns. Again, I mentioned, good hammer firepower. This is very cheap firepower that I'm happy to throw away. And then 2 manticores. The command squads are nice because it's a 65-point unit that just packs 8 ballistic skill 3 plasma gun shots. And with easy access to orders, you can give them reroll 1s to hit or to wound very consistently. And the army has a little bit of CP regen because you have Karav's Aquila. Aquila on the one of the company commanders. So it's a very simple guard detachment that doesn't need to spend any command points. Everything it does is pregame. So during the game, I don't have to spend any real command points on the guard part. I have a CP regen for when my opponent spends command points, and I can funnel all of my command points into the Custodes detachment.
Yeah.
Once I'm on the table, Custodes get all the command points.
Yeah. So that's interesting. So we can kind of talk a little bit about Scions then, because some people have been running mostly just Scions with Custodes. I guess mostly for plasma,
Yeah.
but also cheap kind of drop units, threaten the deep strike, because that's not something that we do very easily. And also, chance for you to get other kind of secondaries that involve moving further upfield. So what do you think of people just running kind of Scions, mostly Scions?
Yeah, Scions can be super useful compared to the normal guard stuff. Guard is a lot cheaper than Scions, but Scions have the innate ballistic skill 3 and the innate deep strike, which is really useful. And with their own regiments, they do have some really unique rules. I personally have used, the normal guard stuff more because with command squads, you can still get that ballistic skill 3 on a much cheaper platform. But I spend 1 CP to outflank a bunch of it rather than getting innate free deep strike, which saving command points with Custodes always feels good because, again, we've got so many great stratagems with Custodes, you don't want to waste any of them. I think one of the best things with Scions is their mission playability. There's a couple different Scion regiments that are all very viable. You can either have, a Scion regiment that has a relic, or sorry, a warlord trait. That's an aura of reroll ones to hit. And then you take all your plasma guns, they innately reroll ones to hit near the warlord. And with Scions, you can buy an extra warlord trait if you happen to want a Custodes warlord instead of a guard warlord. Totally fine. You can make that happen either way. And some of the really good stuff is that you have a 1 CP strat for a different Scion regiment where they can deep strike 5 inches away instead of 9.
Yeah.
And that really helps where a lot of armies will take, one of the banners or scrambler category.
Yeah.
And Custodes can take banners sometimes, but they're not amazing at defending banners objectives all the time because they don't have a high model count. Where if someone tries to take an objective from Custodes, you're probably going to end up kicking them off of it at some point if your opponent rushes onto it. But if they can just hold it for 1 phase, which could be the end of their charge phase, then your banner goes away and you can't raise it until you've kicked them off, and you get a lot less points. So that's a little less reliable. It works for primary with Custodes, but literally your opponent could charge onto an objective. You can murder every single one of them, and your banner is still gone.
Yeah.
And that's what kind of hurts.
Yeah.
But this unlocks scramblers as a really good option. Being able to deep strike 5 inches away, not outflank, just native deep strike. A lot of people just can't defend against that. And also with a 5-inch deep strike, you can actually still land on an objective sometimes. If your opponent's trying to hide on the edge of it to be maybe as far away from a Telemon as possible, you can just land on the other side of that, start contesting them with OBSEC. And that ability to reach out and land on an objective with OBSEC, that's something that Custodes don't bring a lot of. You have bikes, to a lesser extent Venatari, but there's only so much you can do there. And again, those are your only tools for the job, and they have a not cheap points cost associated with them. Guard, this is a 45-point squad in 1 CP. You spend it when your opponent gives you the opportunity, and you just take away primary points. Simple as that. And when they murder that squad, it's a 45-point squad.
Yeah.
I'll trade that for 5 points every day of the week, and I'll do it 10 times in the game if I could.
Yeah. So I think that the I can't remember what the regiment's called now with the 5-inch deep strike, but
I believe that's the Iotan Gorgons.
Gorgons, yeah, that's it. And that's super nifty, and it's really hard. It's actually surprisingly hard to screen against that compared to 9-inch.
It is, 5 versus 9 is a world of difference, and very few armies I've found have been able to screen out the 5-inch deep strike. Whenever I've had that signed attachment with my Custodes, I have never had my scramblers blocked.
Yeah. Especially these days when armies seem like they're getting smaller. At least until we see the orc book come back.
Oof. Yeah. Until that point.
Or NIDS, I guess. So okay. So that's Scions. So if people are interested, I think some of those games from your RTT are available without subscription.
All of them are, actually.
Okay, yeah, which is great. So go watch John's games that he played. I think you won that RTT, actually. Did you not with that list?
I actually did not, unfortunately. I made it close. If anyone's curious, I won't give spoilers on individual game results, but on our YouTube channel, you can find me. I took that list 3 times in the past couple weeks. I took it once into a Death Guard list with a ton of Poxwalkers, once into Nick Nanavati's GT winning Sisters of Battle list. That he was undefeated with up until that game. And then I took it into his Dark Eldar Monstrosity, a list very similar to the one that I played at the Dallas Open. All of those games were very competitive.
Yeah.
And, Custodes definitely, and honestly, at the end of all 3 of those games, I had more resources left than my opponent. So I felt very good about the list. Unfortunately, didn't win the whole thing there, but still felt very good about the army that I was playing with. And it's an army that I'm looking at taking to tournaments in the future as well. just because I don't want to play Drukhari every day.
Yeah, yeah. And just before we move on, the other thing I got to say is mostly kudos to you, but also the other guys you play with. You guys are really good at narrating your thinking during the game. So if you're trying to play that list and figure it out and you want to know how it works, like inside out, like just watch one of John's games. It's like very descriptive, and it's like, yeah, they're super good about it.
Yeah, absolutely. We always like to explain what we're doing, why we're doing it. So we try to make it a really good, both entertaining and a learning experience for everyone who watches our battle reports. So again, please, if you haven't, check it out.
Yeah, but you know what? Everybody tries and starts out like that, but then by turn 2, they forget about it, right? And it becomes silence. And I'm guilty of that as well. So, but you guys keep it going through the whole time. So it's cool. Okay, let's move on to sisters, because there's been a lot of souping of sisters. There was even a monstrosity I saw the other day of triple Telemon, triple Galatis, triple Mortifiers, triple Penitent Engines.
Oh my goodness, I'm in love.
It was basically as many as those things as you could run.
Oh my god, I have a lot of those. I need to run points on how many of those could fit in a list.
A lot.
Holy goodness.
A lot. So yeah, and sisters obviously brings a lot of things we don't have, like Malta for one. So what do you think of sisters as a souping faction?
So sisters are great as a souping faction because you can, they're a very complicated faction with their miracle dice mechanic, but you can make them very reliable with only having limited resources, which is really nice, and you can kind of scale to what you need. Obviously, Custodes and sisters can pair very well together. Custodes really bring something to the table that sisters don't traditionally have, which is very durable obsec units with sticking power.
Yeah.
Sisters, you can make them tougher than you expect, but bottom line, they're usually going to be a toughness 3 unit with a decent armor save and a decent invuln, and weight of dice with some AP will usually drop them.
Yeah.
Miracle dice don't help you if you have to take 50 saves.
Yeah.
It helps you against 5, but not against, when you get 20, 30 and more, it becomes a lot worse. So one of the nice things about sisters is that you generate miracle dice. Like, you can just bring a little bit less tech for generating miracle dice if you have less stuff to use it, and you'll still be able to use everything you generate. And sisters bring incredibly efficient for the points firepower. If you just took a sisters like patrol, you could get just a canonist who's good in combat and is cheap. That's a nice unit to have in any detachment. You could have one sisters squad to just toss on an objective and be, again, cheaper than any Custodes squad I want to leave there while still being obsec. And then you could put in like 2 Retributor squads. And Retributors are amazing firepower for the points. For 140 points, and honestly, if I may do 160 here, but you can just take 3 or 4 multi-Maltas and 2 Cherubs on a 5-girl squad. They pop out, hit on 3s, rolling 1s, ignoring the heavy penalty. They're going to pop both Cherubs the turn that they jump out, and they're going to fire essentially 4 extra multi-Malta shots. Yep. You're going to get 10 or 12 for 140 or 160 multi-Malta shots out of one unit here, and you'll just drop a miracle dice or 2 on that to make sure that the one that goes through is 6 damage, to get a couple extra wounds if you're shooting at something transhuman. It's high AP, good stats, and it's not that expensive for what you get. Find 140 points of Custodes, and that's going to be like 5 bolter shots. 140 points of sisters, 10 multi-meltas, and it's good. The first one's 6 damage. It's like, oh, it is a very different feeling there. And I think that sisters are a little different from Custodes, or from the other allies for Custodes, in that you do want to have a minimum amount of sisters, I feel. Mm-hmm. Guard, I can make that guard attachment as big or small as I want, and it's still going to provide some value. I think sisters, you kind of need to hit a minimum point before it's worth it. But, in an even partnership here, about 1,000 Custodes, 1,000 sisters, you can get some really good tools for Sisters of Battle. They also have amazing stratagems across the board, and a lot of them are only 1 CP, which helps when you're still trying to fund an ally. Repentia are a fantastic melee unit. Yep. At this point, you have probably experienced Repentia at some point in your life and been hit by them. Yep. And if you have, you kind of want to know what it feels like to hit someone with the 2-handed chainsword. Let me tell you, it is exhilarating. It is a feeling right there. It is one that you will enjoy. So it does give you a very different thing, because Custodes Close Combat is usually very reliable in what it does, but it also only does what it does. Where, Custodes, I'm going to hit on 2s and reroll 1s. I'm going to have a good wound roll and wound on and reroll 1s, but I only have 15 attacks. And like I'm probably getting like 13 or 14 wounds out of that, but I'm never getting 16.
Yeah.
And Repentia will solve that
And then
problem.
the old
They can just
D3,
drop
of
the bucket.
course, D3.
And then, oh yeah, and then the D3 damage sets in. Repentia have a nice flat 2. You know what you're getting.
Yeah, yeah. No, for sure. Having played against sisters, like it would be nice to hit somebody with a squad of Repentia for sure.
Oh yeah, it's man, be careful, Darren. Once you start doing that, it's going to be hard to put the sisters down.
And they're getting a new book now, we've just
And they're
learned.
getting a new book now.
And more
Sisters
models.
already, and no, oh, beautiful models too, fantastic looking. Yeah, It certainly is not a bad time to collect sisters. Sisters is definitely an army that you could start as a pure force and grow into its own pure army. But since we're talking about mostly Custodes here, I'll keep it to the allied part. They provide good psychic defense. Again, they have a 4-up deny the witch strat the same way Custodes do, but they're different names, so you could use both on the same spell if you really wanted to. As well, they have very consistent reach out and touch ability that Custodes sometimes lack. When you fail a charge with Custodes, it feels so bad.
Like you just wasted your whole game.
Like your whole turn. Now they're going to run away and you have to chase them down for another turn. It doesn't feel great. Sisters can take that away when you need to go get something done. Also, sisters do provide different tiers of hitting things because, again, sometimes something needs to happen, but you don't want to spend a very expensive Custodes unit on it. And also, sisters provide a different type of firepower. Again, allies provide different data sheets and different profiles. And as the meta constantly shifts, sometimes that's what you need. Like, Custodes shooting is sometimes very good, but also sometimes there's Mortarians on every table, and you look at it and you're like, boy, Hurricane Bolters and Lastrum Bolters and Venetari pistols that I forget the name of. That's just not what I want right now.
Yeah.
And when you need a different profile of shooting and you have limited data sheets, sometimes you got to think outside the book. And adding in a couple Retributor squads as allies, that will solve most of your Mortarian-related problems.
Yeah, and people have been throwing out Hurricane Bolters again with Drukhari coming to prominence, and then it's like, well, Mortarian's still out there, Terminators are still out there, and those Hurricanes aren't doing shit against those things.
Yeah, maybe salvo launchers for Drukhari.
Yeah. Okay, so the sisters definitely, I think, bring a lot to the table. Scarred, Scions. So obviously their book is coming up soon as well, but Admech, do you think Admech is a good ally for us?
Yes, I do.
They got a lot of janky stuff too.
I'll speak to the current AdMech book because I unfortunately have no idea what's in the new one. No, GW doesn't tell me these things. But AdMech does add a lot of different small janky tools that can really give the opponent something to think about. Custodes are not an army without jank, but they are an army that's limited in their jank. Yeah. And most of their jank relies around either your opponent being close to you or defensive stratagems, which are very potent, very powerful. Not complaining at all. I love having access to some of those defensive stratagems for Custodes, but when you want to just have good old-fashioned jank, Custodes aren't always the army for that. And you can get very good, cheap disposable units with like scout moves, like Cerberus Raiders. Perfect example of a great screening unit. Yeah. They're not fragile for their points, but there are a lot of wounds. So again, very good into smite spam armies. You're looking at a 48-point Cerberus Raider squad being 9 wounds. That's, I think, just about the same cost as a 3-wound Custodes Guard. Again, you're looking at almost triple wounds for the points, same as a Guardsman unit. But this is on a scouting unit with a 4-up armor save that can sometimes be in cover. And they also have really good screening stratagems, like a 2 CP to move when you get charged, which makes them a fantastic screen. And it gives your opponent things to think about. And it's also one of those stratagems that you never actually use. It's a stratagem that you tell your opponent about and watch them change their game plan. Because but then you don't have to spend the command points. You just need to have access to it.
Yeah. That's exactly what happens. You don't charge them because you know it's coming. It's just like, oh.
Yeah, like I'm not going to charge them because I know you're going to move them. Well, I don't want that to happen. So, yeah, it provides a lot of really good value there. What I think AdMech bring best is, one, they do bring indirect fire, and they bring very good mid-strength firepower. Again, I sometimes struggle with Custodes to get long-range firepower that is somewhere in between an Arachnus Blaze Cannon and a Hurricane Bolter. My options are AP4 flat damage 3 2-shots and 12 shots and that are like AP dash strength 4. And AdMech bring really good mid-tier firepower when you're trying to kill raiders and things of that ilk, man, AdMech have some options. Again, indirect fire on Scorpius tanks. Also, their aircraft. Custodes have aircraft, yes, but the Orion and the Ares are not something you casually put in a list. And AdMech have access to their wonderful bombers. Again, great mortal wound generation, something Custodes really don't have access to. And if you're trying to kill things out of phase, for example, if you want to wound the Nightbringer in the movement phase, if you want to kill Necron warriors without reanimation, work around the Farp invul of a pink horror unit, bombers and mortal wound stuff and snipers are way better tools than what Custodes have access to. They also have some good strats, the ability to remove auras off of a bomber, or the ability to fly over a unit and essentially tremor shell it with their seismic bomb stratagem. That is something that could be stacked with a Tanglefoot grenade, and that is how you lose friends. But that's how you achieve victory. If you ever seismic bomb and Tanglefoot someone, you're gonna get some looks, and it will be worth it.
Well, the look from a good Tanglefoot alone is always worth it. So
absolutely, but take that 12-inch move, have it -6, done, perfect.
That is pretty mean.
A lot of things you can do there.
That's pretty mean. Yeah, I mean, just having a couple of those bombers would be so annoying for your opponent.
I love bombers because they do give access to engage on all fronts early on. Again, Custodes usually have to take a board control secondary, but it's hard to get it turn 1 because they don't have a lot of expendable units, and they don't have a lot of fast units. And while, yes, your bite captain could zip into a different table quarter turn 1, you usually don't want to do that alone because he's going to just get shot a lot.
Yeah.
That's bad. So I would much rather have a bomber that can fly into the opponent's deployment zone, drop 12 stubber shots and 5 mortal wounds and half move on someone. And while the Custodes start rolling up, and a lot of these things are not actually expensive. You're looking at, if I'm thinking of a patrol of AdMech, I have a very cheap character, I have a troop squad, and I have I have maybe 2 Cerberus Raiders. So I now have a little OBSEC unit to sit on a back objective, a random character whose job is to run around screen or just do something, perform an action, or whatever, raise a banner, I don't care. He can be an emergency screen, 2 very good screening units, and let's say I add 2 bombers, which are also good screening units, good mission tools, mortal wound generation. That whole little package there is going to cost about the same as a good-sized Terminator, as like a good-sized bike unit.
Yeah.
And that's not bad.
Oh, it's very good.
That's really good. I mean, you can probably get, again, the 1 troop, the 1 HQ, the 2 Cerberus Raiders units, and the 2 bombers. I would bet that you could fit that in around 420, 440 points offhand. I'd have to do the math, but it's really not actually that many points.
Yeah.
Probably is less than 450. I would bet money on that.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I think those are probably the big 4, and certainly a lot of people have these armies. Any other souping options you think are probably less popular or less good?
So Space Marines are the obvious one, where Space Marines feel so reliant on their doctrines that it feels bad to include them. Yeah. But I will say there are a couple of Space Marine lists that you would actually, or allies that you would want to consider. Usually you kind of weigh it on which one is popular because they're super doctrine, which one is popular without that. Things like Dark Angel Talon Masters are a very good ally option, but you kind of have to wonder, well, if I'm doing Dark Angel Talon Masters, why don't I just play Dark Angel's army? Yeah. And for that reason, you might as well, because Custodes are good, but they're not so different from a Terminator squad for the purpose of protecting Talon Masters that I want to give up doctrines. I think what you more look at is things like Ultramarine Invictor Dreadnoughts with a redeploy or Iron Hand character Volkite Dreads that actually provide something very different from what Custodes have access to, while the Custodes still provide something different from that. And that's the important part. You want the Custodes to bring something to this equation as well. I'm not telling anyone not to play Custodes because I love Custodes, but don't turn your list into a worse Space Marine list, because at that point, play Space Marines. Yeah. Make sure that you're keeping a reason to beat Custodes. So for me, I don't think Space Marines usually are going to bring much as an ally option. Yeah. I think I think you mentioned Knights earlier on in this episode. Knights is actually an interesting one. Honestly, the Morax builds are super strong into the Dark Eldar meta we have right now. They provide a lot of decently durable but very good firepower platforms that can still hide behind obscuring terrain. I think Armigers are a much better ally for Custodes than the big Knights, because you don't need to funnel nearly as many command points into the Armigers. You could honestly just take a super heavy auxiliary and 3 Armigers in it. just 3 more axes with lightning locks. It gives you 36 shots that are Tesla, so you're going to average 36 hits. Strength 6, AP 2. They can fall back and shoot if you do a custom household. And then they, although I guess you'd want to be a different detachment to make that work. And they can get extra AP in a half distance. You can get some really cool tools with knights without having to invest a lot. And again, it gives you access to a different stat. When you're trying to kill T6 boats and T3 infantry that are 1 wound, just packing a buttload of strength 6 AP 2 1 damage is a great response to that. Or Helverins, generically good at shooting raiders as well. If you're trying to fit some really long range firepower, Helverins are, I think, 60 or 72 inches. You don't have to measure them very often. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
You're going to be in range. So that is something that Custodes don't really have.
Yeah. Definitely stay away from the big knights. They at the moment anyway, they still require too much CP to really kind of get their worth for a quarter.
There is some really cool stuff with big knights, but I don't think Custodes are the ally combination you're looking for here. So I would say Armigers would be the knight ally of choice there. Other than that, we've already talked Inquisition, Guard, Admech, Sisters, and Marines. I think Grey Knights would be the only faction we haven't really mentioned. Same thing, their tides, I think, provide a huge amount of value to them, but they do provide a cool indirect factor with Astral Aim. However, I don't think that the mode of firepower that they provide, and again, Grey Knights are a CP-hungry army. I don't think you want those two competing here, because Grey Knights rely on their strats. Like, Grey Knights without their strats are just not the same. Guard without their strats are slightly less efficient, but definitely in the tolerable zone, where their strats are usually nice little bonuses that are cool to have, and you can use the Custodes instead. Grey Knights, you kind of have to use their strats, and I never want Custodes to be playing second fiddle when it comes to who's spending the command points, because I have such great stratagems, and I feel like the army really benefits from them.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, well, that's going to wrap up our discussion about soup. I'm going to ask you, before we go to the Discord questions for you, John, I'm going to ask you a question that I'm sure everybody's going to ask you anyway. Name a few things that you would like to see in our new book.
Oh boy. So first, I would like to see Custodes get rules that let them count as multiple models on objectives. Second, I would like to see Custodes' weapon stats get changed in the same way that we've seen a lot of the other armies get improved. Custodes have some wonderfully weird weapons, and I love pronouncing their names and trying to remember exactly which Arachnus, Blaze, Maelstrom, Storm, Bolt, Cannon, Vulcanite I'm shooting at a given time. I usually do know my names, unfortunately. I like the Spiculous Bolt Launcher best. That one's fun to say. But because they have such unique weapons that are not remotely involved in other things, it means that they didn't get updated with the Marine Codex. So they improved, a lot of weapons for the Imperium, and Sisters got a buff by that, but Custodes stayed the same. A lot of their weapons, like, salvo launchers, I want to see improved. I really think that the Guardian Spear needs to be rapid fire 2. I think it needs to be flat 2 damage, and I think the Custodes Guard needs an extra attack, period.
Yeah.
Because right now they get a little bit too outpaced in damage output by Marines. That's the generic Custodian, that is. Other things is actually, this is a personal thing. I want Unleash the Lions to be on any infantry unit, by the way, not just the Terminators. I think it makes so much sense for any Custodes unit to split up into one-man units. Yep. And, from a balance perspective, I don't think it'd be anything crazy. This is just a rule of cool. I like my individual warriors that feel almost unstoppable to the mortal man.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's a good list and none too unreasonable. This kind of topic.
I try to be realistic. Yeah. I don't want 5-point Custodes guards. We're not Dark Elder here.
Okay, so I'm gonna go to the questions from the Discord chat. If people have questions on the stream, please feel free to post them up. Okay, here we go. Okay, so first question is, what's your choice of soup? And so I think you said Guard is your favorite.
Guard is my favorite. Adamec is my close second. Sisters are not a bad choice here. The main reason I don't do that is that I actually like Sisters pure. And I think that Sisters don't necessarily need an ally, whereas Guard really like having one. Adamec doesn't need one either, but they provide some cool janky tools. So Guard is my first choice here, just because they're very cheap and efficient at what they do. And that's the biggest thing, is that I think Guard takes away the least from the main faction. You really don't need to use any of their strats. Their strats are all pure opportunistic bonus. Oh, hey, it would be nice to do this right now. I guess I'll throw the CP in. It's never I'm game planning on using these 2 guard stratagems. So for me, guard is my first choice. I love my manticores. I love my cheap plasma squads, and I like cheap obsec infantry that can move fast and be a good screen for Custodes.
Yeah. And we'll see. AdMech book's coming. Sisters book is coming. No mention of guard book anytime. So
I don't think we're getting that one soon, but fingers crossed.
I don't know. What do you think of those Gaunt's ghost models?
I was very excited about that, and that they're getting 40k rules too. I'm cautiously optimistic. We'll see what the future brings, but GW hasn't missed yet when it comes to new rules, so I'm sure one way or another there's good stuff in the pipeline for every army.
Yeah. Okay, what is your, let's say, what is your favorite Custodes unit, and what do you think is the best Custodes unit?
Okay, my favorite Custodes unit is the classic Orion gunship.
Okay.
I say classic, it's not really classic. I just love it. Mostly because I had a little bit of a run in summer of 2019 where we brought 3 Orions to, we brought 3 Orions to the ATC, and then I brought 2 of them to Nova, and it was very, very, very fun. And it was very trolly, and I just loved it, so it has a special place in my heart because it was just one of those things where when you show up with 3 Orion gunships and most people weren't even aware that this unit existed and you've got to explain what's happening here, I got some looks and I just really enjoyed that list, so I've got some nostalgia there. As far as what I think is best, I'm actually going to say the Contemptor Galatus Dreadnought. The Telemon is very close competition, the Shield Guard is very close competition, but I love the Galatus Dreadnought for the price point it fills, where the Telemon is amazing, but it is an investment. Yep. And I don't really like spamming them. 2 is my max, and they play a different role. But I love the Galatus because it's not cheap, but it's cheap enough to be disposable, where I'm very happy to send it on a one-way trip where it's going to do a job and then die. I don't like that with the Telemon, but it also packs enough of a punch that it can go somewhere that a guard squad maybe can't.
Yeah.
I love the Galatus Dreadnought a lot. It's probably my second favorite unit, actually. And so far in all my games with Custodes in 9th edition, it has been the unit that has impressed me the most time after time after time.
All right. So let's see. We answered that question. Do you think, so kind of like reverse soup, so where other Imperial factions are souping in Custodes, which we haven't talked about tonight, but do you think like Shield Guard is like something that other factions should be thinking of like souping in?
Yeah, I think both Imperial Guard and Sisters would really benefit from that, where you just want a couple of units that can take a punch and still stand there. Guard, he kind of has to weight of bodies their way to hold an objective or hope that you're too distracted to deal with it. Sisters, they can put semi-durable units out, but they just don't have anything that is remotely on the same tier as Custodes Guard. We saw the LV No winning list use the shield wall to great effect. I think Sisters are still the army that best benefits there, but they're also so strong as a pure list that I don't feel bad just being pure. Guard really appreciates that Custodes ally. Having something like the pseudo-unkillable Bite Captain, Shield Guard, it's just very powerful for them.
Right, okay. What do you think, here's an interesting question, what do you think would need to happen in the new Codex to make you give up soup?
I would need...
Or just the same things that you already said?
Oh, okay, the same things I already said. And actually, there's one thing that I forgot to say. I really want Sisters of Silence to become a troops unit. However, you can never take more Sisters of Silence than you take core infantry Custodes units.
Yeah.
That would be something I really want, because I want to take a battalion, but I don't always want to take that many points of Custodes Guard. I love Custodes Guard, but the shield units are good. I don't want to just start off with a 450 punch to the face before I've even started thinking about what units I want on my list. I think Sisters of Silence give a more diverse, cheap troop squad, which again Custodes just need. They're not bad at it right now, but bottom line is that the anti-psych abilities are not as good as just being obsec and filling a troop slot.
Yeah.
So that's kind of why I turned to an ally for that role. But if kind of similar to what Death Guard got, where you can take all Poxwalker troops if you have a bunch of Terminators, but you can't just have Poxwalkers and tanks. That's what I want. I think it would be a little silly to have a Custodes battalion that's Trajan a bike captain, 15 girls, and then, your Telemon dreadnoughts. That doesn't feel like a Custodes battalion, but, a Custodes guard squad, a Terminator squad, two Sisters of Silence squad, that feels a lot more like what I would expect the Talons of the Emperor to look like on the battlefield. And that's what GW is aiming for. So that would be a big hope for me. Also, I would love to see just some generic stat boost along the line so that I feel like Custodes can really pack all the damage they need by themselves, because that's a little inconsistent at the moment.
Yeah, certainly if we get the changes to things like, say, D3 disappearing, for example, that all the other books we've seen get, then that will make a big difference. Okay, so final question then. Do you think that we're going to, or I guess the Admech book or the Sisters book as well, you think the trend is going to continue and people are not going to want to soup these things anymore because you lose too much?
I think that soup is very non-mandatory. We saw in 8th edition that almost every army souped, especially with Imperium. But I think that we're going to continue the trends where most factions do not need soup to be competitive, but if you choose to soup and you're creative with your combinations, you can still do some good things. A lot of the new books, like Death Guard and Dark Eldar and Necron, well, Necrons are a bad example. Death Guard and Drukhari are very viable by themselves, but a couple of people have taken those elements, put them into a soup list, and been creative with it and made it work. You see Mark Perry's GT winning list with Death Guard, Sean Naden's Dallas open list. That was also both very successful armies. I think that archetype can be modeled, can be copied later on with more books, but it shouldn't be necessary. And that's what I want. Like, it makes sense to me for the Imperium factions to fight together, but also I don't like that being every table. I don't like every single table having the Blood Angels captain scouts. Like, that got silly. But an occasional soup army popping up in the meta, no problem with that. I think that's cool and a good option if you want to pursue it, but I think it will be less popular because it will be less mandatory. And a lot of people like taking pure armies, and I don't blame them. I like taking pure armies sometimes as well. I love my pure Space Marines. I like using pure Custodes sometimes, but sometimes I also like adding in my guard.
All right. So before we go, what kind of give us a sneak peek on Custodes content coming up on Art of War?
Right on. Not this week, but I think the next week I'm going to be busting out my Custodes and Guard list again. I'll think about it, maybe make some tweaks on this iteration, but I'm going to be playing it. I believe the plan is into Nick playing Harlequins.
Oh.
I'd have to double check the schedule, but if you keep an eye on the artofwar40k.com, we post our schedule every Monday for the upcoming week, and you can keep an eye on that, and you will see the next time there is going to be Custodes on our YouTube channel. And those games are always free to watch, so you know what? Honestly, even if you don't pay for our content, no problem at all. Just come check it out. We always like getting more eyeballs, more clicks on YouTube, and just more people enjoying good 40k content. That's what we're here for.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks very much, John, for joining us and talking about Custodes and soup. It was a great episode, and I think people really enjoy that. So thank you very much for joining us.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me on. It was a real pleasure, and always good to talk about the Custodes.
Yeah, so everybody go check out Art of War, and they have lots of free content. And if you do want to subscribe or get some coaching, they're obviously, none better people in the industry right now to coach you on how to play 40K. And they've all been playing where we've all been sitting on our asses with COVID. So that's a big part of it. And so thanks very much, everybody, for watching. Thanks for following, subscribing, and watching our streams and everything. And stay tuned next week. Next week, we have Jim Vessel on to talk with our next faction focus, which is against Death Guard. And so that's another requested one because a faction we struggle against as well. So stay tuned for the schedule for next week. And otherwise, thank you very much, John. And everybody have a good night.